we were challenged with this issue. Did anyone try and troubleshoot and was able to resolve it? I'll share the issue that we faced. Hmm. You see it on my screen now. This is what we faced yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah. So was anyone able to troubleshoot and find the reason for it, why it was happening, what could have possibly gone wrong, why it says access denied? Nobody got time? Monisha, Jitin, Shiva, Naeem, Suraj. Uh, let's talk about it. So I actually looked into this and it almost took me 3 to 4 hours to fix this issue. So right after the session, we all took lunch break and then I had another session that I needed to. So in the evening after the second batch, I actually give it some time, research for it. So first of all, there is no information available on Microsoft documentation with respect to this issue. What they say, I'll tell you. All right. So guys, remember one thing, when you are in technology domain, it is very important that that you invest time in troubleshooting, in discovering and identifying the root cause, because not every time you will get a documentation or an SOP that specifically talks about what could have been the issue. So this is where it all started. You can see the version of it. The Microsoft Entra Connect Sync agent version is 2.3.2, I'm sorry, 2.3.20.0, and it was last published on 15th of July 2024. Now, since this synchronization is something that you don't do every day, you only configure it once, and then you just manage your identities, because synchronization works in the backend. You don't need to reconfigure it. You don't need to maintain or modify it all the time. You just do it once and it works perfectly fine. That's what they do when it comes to the synchronization. So what has primarily happened, this is what I anticipate, that after this version was introduced, either no organization did the synchronization activity, they did the configuration with this agent on a specific version of operating system, or if somebody did, then they basically approached Microsoft, because who is doing the synchronization? Typically a customer who is already with Microsoft, they already have some sort of plan. So Microsoft, on its prerequisites for Microsoft Entra Connect, which they publish on 21st of July, after making this version available, on that prerequisites, they clearly say that, I'll show you here. So this is the prerequisites. They say that this is what you need on Microsoft Entra ID. We already have this, which is you need a free trial, you need Entra Admin Center. We have all of it. Verify your domain. We don't need it because that's not needed. Prepare your on-premises data. So they have this identity fix tool that they basically recommend to run on your on-premises domain controller. What it will do, it will identify duplicate identities. So if you have multiple user accounts with the same name or duplicate identities, if they exist, it will basically show you those identities that you can fix. This is both for Microsoft Entra ID and Microsoft 365. If you are synchronizing identities in Entra or 365. That's what they did. So I basically looked into this tool. I downloaded and installed it. It could only identify two identities, which looks similar. And then it asked me to either change one of them or delete one of them. So that did not help. Now, this is where the crux lies. Understand the crux. It says the Active Directory schema version and forest functional level must be Windows Server 2003 or later. If you remember when we provisioned our domain controller with 2016, the, the forest and domain functional level was 2016. I would say it was above 2003 or later, right? The domain controller can run any version as long as schema version and forest level requirements are met. Our schema and forest level requirements were met. It says, see, this is where the crux lies. It says you might require a paid support program if you require support for domain controllers running Windows Server 2016 or older. That's what it says. So it says you might require a paid support program. This is where the crux lies, because when you look into this, when I investigated into this, when I clicked on these logs, I could see that it was related to schema. The user that we were using, sync admin, that user did not have access to schema. So while it was trying to create a synchronization service, it could not read the schema. So what I did, what I did to fix it, I basically granted schema admin access to the user, to sync admin user, and I reran the synchronization option, reran the entire process. When I reran the entire process, I got this error. This is another error. Now, this another error says that an error has occurred on the root page, preventing this service from continuing. To protect your existing data, wizard must be closed. It appears that you are assuming a scenario which was not completed previously. So which was true. I actually provided schema admin access and then ran it once again. And then it says what to do next. It says, please contact Microsoft using this page or contact Microsoft support. So ultimately, it was asking me to connect with Microsoft support, right? So that's where, because on this, I could not find anything. When I clicked on this log, it was talking about some missing registry entries. Now, how will I know which registry entry is missing as a person? Registry is a complex subject. It's Microsoft product. They understand it well. Then I researched it on internet to find the appropriate registry entries for Entra Connect Sync agent for a server operating system. I could not find even a single article. I extensively researched for a couple of minutes. I did not find it. And as per this article, we were doing everything okay. Then what I did, just to separate or just to differentiate whether something is not right with this agent, what I did, I already had an agent, a previous agent, which I used in my previous training, that I had on my system installed. So I had this agent here, which was a version before this. Over here, you can see Azure AD Connect. If I go to the details of this one, you will see this is the version. It is 2.0.2.0. So this is a prior version of it. What I did, I basically used this version. So I uploaded this version on the same server, 2019 server, and I installed with this version, and it worked perfectly fine. So I'll show you. All right, so I'm logged into my Azure subscription. If I navigate to Entra ID, you will see that it worked perfectly fine under users. Here's the option. You can see it's the VM, ADDS VM, with which synchronization service ran. This, so what basically it does, when the synchronization is successfully completed, it creates two accounts. One account in on-premises, the other account in cloud, which is on-premises directory synchronization service account. This account got created, and as part of this account, this is my sync admin user that I created yesterday. So this sync admin user got synchronized from on-premises. You can see, and how do you differentiate whether these accounts are getting synchronized from on-premises or they are cloud-only identities? From this column. The column says on-premise sync enabled. In this column, if you see yes against an identity, it means that identity is synchronized from on-premises. You can see yes, yes. So these identities are getting synchronized from on-premises. So it actually worked. And if I show you the VM is here, which is ADDS VM. So this really worked on the same VM when I used an old agent on the same VM. However, that should not, I'm saying, if you use an old agent, you're not missing any capabilities. Capabilities remains the same because it's a SaaS solution. Capabilities are provided by Microsoft. However, I wanted to troubleshoot it. So I thought maybe this has something to do with the operating system version. Probably the uh, agent is not compatible with a specific version of operating system, right? Because it is not for this training, it is for my consulting as well. I will be getting a lot of customers coming back to me asking for the same trouble if they also face it. So I need to be prepared. So that is where what I did, I tried to deploy the new version on 2016 server. We tried it on 2019. When I tried to do it on 2016 server, 2016 OS, this is what I got. Right at the beginning, when I was trying to connect to Azure AD, I got this error. This is the error that I got. Now, when I tried to look for this information, once again, I could not get any information. It was just asking me to restart Azure AD Connect with interactive logon option. Interactive logon basically means run as admin. So I tried with run as admin. It did not work. I, in fact, changed the execution policy from restricted to everyone, remote unsigned, even though it did not work. So once again, there was no information available for this error also. Then in the end, what I did, I tried to do the same thing on the remaining operating system, which was left with server 22 data center, Windows Server 22 data center, because 2016 at the beginning it was failing. 2019 it was giving some error for which no information was available, and Microsoft was asking to connect to a paid support program, which means they needed money so that they can manually create or put those registry entries in the system so that you can start to work with this version or the try other operating system. So I tried it with Windows Server 22 data center and it worked perfectly fine. The synchronization actively worked well with previous version. I'm saying this is for 2016 OS, and with this version, it also perfectly worked fine. And I was able to synchronize. You can see here, cloudexpert.in, which is my domain here. So it worked perfectly fine. Then what I did on 2016 itself, when 2016 it worked fine with the old agent, then I tried to install the new agent. So I downloaded the new agent and tried to upgrade it. When I tried to upgrade it, so it says upgrade Azure Active Directory Connect, and that's where I got the, I'm saying when I tried to update it, it also worked fine. So what is happening here? I'm saying why there is no hue and cry with Microsoft. Existing customers who already have Microsoft Entra Azure Active Directory Connect service up and running, when this new version was launched, and if they have enabled automatic updates, then it was automatically updated in the backend, and they never realized that this version has some installation issues because upgrade did not face any issue. The upgrade worked perfectly fine. However, when you try to install this from scratch, which means anybody after 15th of July any customer, any organization tried to do it, and if they tried it on 2016 and 2019 version server operating system, I'm sure they must come across the same issue. And probably they approached Microsoft because they were an existing customer. They had support from Microsoft. So they directly lodged a ticket support request with Microsoft, wherein Microsoft engineer actually helped resolve this issue. And, and that is why there is no article available on the internet. Nobody is searching for this issue, even on TechNet, even on third-party websites. And Microsoft themselves did not also put that in their troubleshooting scenario. If you see this article, which basically talks about troubleshoot object synchronization with Microsoft Entra Connect Sync. This article was updated on 15th of November, which means Microsoft is updating this article very frequently. This was updated 2 days before, and they keep on updating this article as and when they get new issues. You can see here, it talks about UPN mismatch that you all have. It talks about other troubleshooting steps, but it does not even talk about this issue that related to the access. That's it. In this article, it doesn't have this, which basically means a good lesson. I'm saying a great lesson for all of you. If you know, when you are into technology domain, that sometimes while you troubleshoot an issue, you may not get a ready-made solution when you try to search it over the internet. Sometimes you need to use your own brain, do your own research, use your own knowledge and experience, read the logs, and and dig deep to the root cause of that issue. And there is no guarantee that you will be able to reach. If you are not, then approach the OEM. At least you will be content, you will be happy from inside that I did my level best. Since this is my technology, not my technology, I am approaching the one who has created it. They can probably help me with what is missing. And you will realize that they will talk about something that you have not done because you did not have that access. That's what is very important. And at the same time, try it on multiple systems. Don't just stick to that system. If it doesn't work on one version of operating system, one version of SKU, try it on other SKU, because sometimes it has something to do with the compatibility also. When these new updates, new patches, new versions are released, sometimes they are not updated with everything, or they are not tested thoroughly by the OEM for each version of theirs or for each version of other products. For example, what if you try to install it on Mac? What if you try to install it on Linux? You may probably get into the same issue, because you can install them on Mac and Linux also, as long as Mac and Linux have clear line of sight with your Active Directory domain computer, domain server, domain controller server. So that's what synchronization. So that's what troubleshooting is all about. Make sure, remember that things will not be smooth all the time. You will come across roadblocks. You will need to troubleshoot. And if you have this habit of troubleshooting, you will always remain a good technician. You will not, stop loving or stop liking your profession, your job. Otherwise, you will be out of this domain, because technology is becoming so complex these days with, with AI, with other things getting integrated. It's becoming very complex. You are getting so many strange, uh, a strange output which you did not see in the past. Okay, so that's about it. Now, as I say, don't believe when somebody says something. Being a technician, do it yourself, see it for yourself. So I already have updated my documentation. I will go ahead and show you the entire exercise from the beginning. That's the reason I deleted it from my account. I deleted all the, all the synchronization from my account. I'm going to show it once again to you. So what we are going to do, we are going to build a server 2022 virtual machine, deploy this new version, configure all the settings, and then I will be talking about some additional configurations that you need to be doing, right? So we are going to do it from scratch here, and you all will do it along with me. I'm saying, just go ahead and build that virtual machine along with me and do the entire synchronization along with me. It is the same set of process that we did yesterday. No change is going to happen in the approach. The only change that will happen is, since I have already synchronize cloud expert dot in here. So I will not be using cloud expert dot in domain. I will be using a generic domain like contoso.com, which makes it more aligned with your use case because you all are using a domain that does not synchronize with cloud because your cloud domain is different and your on-premises domain is different, or you're not using a custom domain. So let's go ahead and do this activity real quick. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, Raghu.
All right. Guys, please make sure that you remain in the session, you remain attentive for next 1 hour, because what we are going to discuss in this 1 hour is something that you don't do more often, but this is something that you should be aware of. So we are going to provision a new virtual machine with server 2022 operating system on it. I will provision. We can use the same virtual network that we created yesterday. There is no need to change anything on the virtual network. So I'll put the virtual machine name as Win2K22 EDDS VM. Region I will take Canada Central because my network is in Canada Central. I will not take availability zone. I'll not go with any of these advanced options. And I'm taking Windows Server 2022 data center Azure edition. I'm saying in 2022, you only have two editions available, which is Azure edition and some hot patch. Hot patch basically means probably there was some issue with this edition. So they come up with a new one, which is known as hot patch. We'll go with this one without hot patch, the normal one, because the hot patch has some additional cost. So we'll try to reduce the cost. I'll just go with 2 CPU core 8 GB RAM, which is more than sufficient. That's it. The basic options I've selected.
Raghu, the size will be 2 CPU, 8 GB RAM. That should be.
Yeah, 8 GB is more than sufficient actually.
Okay.
There is no point of wasting more money. Okay, so on the next disk tab, as we always do, I'm saying this is typical virtual machine provisioning that we have done so far. Standard SSD, and we'll take standard SSD here. And we will check the box, which is delete with virtual machine. Next is networking. On the networking tab, I will select my virtual network that I created for this activity, as well as the subnet, which is AD subnet. Rest remains the same. I'll just check the box, which is delete public IP and NIC when the VM is deleted. Management tab, I will not select any settings. I'll just go with the defaults. On the monitoring tab, I'll go with the default. On the advanced tab, I'll go with the default. Text, I can definitely put the same as I always do, owner and purpose. That's it. I'll hit review plus create. So the cost of this virtual machine is going to be 16, almost 17 rupees per hour. Why this is coming as expensive? Because this is using server 2022 operating system, plus the size of the virtual machine that I've chosen is D series instead of B, because B is not available for this virtual machine. I'm saying with the newer operating systems, you need higher configurations. You cannot run a newer operating system and on an old machine because its requirements are higher resources. So that's okay. All right, the deployment got completed. It was quick. I'll navigate to resource. Since we have just completed the deployment, you will see this this warning that virtual machine agent status is not ready. It will take a couple of minutes to get synchronized, but that doesn't stop us from proceeding to the next steps. I'll just connect to this virtual machine. All right, this has come up. So you know the drill. After you are connected to the server, you will need to add Active Directory domain services role to that server and promote that server as a domain controller. So I'll do the same thing. I'll navigate to manage, add roles and feature. There is no change in the process since yesterday. You will select Active Directory domain services, click next, 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 install. So I'm installing Active Directory domain services role on this server. बेटा आप बताओ यहाँ पे कैसे चला लोगे अब बताओ मैं यहाँ ट्रेनिंग दे रहा हूँ आप मोबाइल चलाओगे कितनी भी कम कर लो मेरे को आवाज तो आएगी ना बेटा all right while this is getting done let me quickly take attendance all right so this part completed I'll close it I'll move on to the next part which is after you add the role to the server you basically promote the server to a domain controller the process remains the same. Here you will select add a new forest because you don't have a domain. So you will first create a forest and then domain inside it. So I'm going to use Contoso now because I already have my cloudexpert.in synchronized. So I will use contoso.com. You can also use your name.com. It hardly makes any difference because it's a lab environment. You're not going to continue with this configuration or transform this to your production. Now, since this is server 2022, it will take some time for the configuration because it is more heavy than the previous versions of server operating system. And that's the reason I always go with a lightweight server operating system. But since the agent is new, it only supports this. So in other way, Microsoft is kind of encouraging or enforcing customers use the newer version. So I'll type the directory service restore password. I did explain what this is yesterday. All right, all prerequisite check will pass, I know. With some warnings, which is okay. We don't need to bother about it. There will be one related to the dynamic IP, dynamic public IP configured on one of the network interfaces of this server, which it would basically recommend us to convert to static because the server will have DNS services configured on it. And for DNS to work, for DNS server to function properly, it must have a static private IP address configured on. So that's where this warning is coming. I'll hit install and start to install the version.
Raghu, I'm doing the steps. In the second step, the functional level and domain functional level should stay as 16, right? 2016. There's no
Yeah,
changes in that.
what they say, what Entra Connect prerequisite is saying, if you focus, that prerequisite is saying that it should be version 2003 and above,
Yeah.
right? And what we have here is more than what they need. This is what they say. It says Microsoft Entra Connect must be installed on a domain joined Windows Server 2016 or later. Now see here, we recommend using domain joined Windows Server 2022, right? So, and if you look for the forest and domain functional level, it clearly says the Active Directory schema version and forest functional level must be Windows Server 2003 or later. Your ours is 2016, which is okay. I'm saying which is far more better than what they actually are asking for. Make sense? So we are good. I'm saying we don't need to bother about the prerequisites. After the installation completes, so installation complete, it machine will automatically reboot. So we let the machine reboot. So machine is rebooting as we speak. Now, while this machine is rebooting, I can go ahead and make the private IP of this machine static, though it has no relevance to this lab. However, when you have other member servers joined to this domain, at that point in time, they will find it difficult to authenticate if the machine does not have a static IP. And if this machine happens to reboot, then the IP will change. And with that, name resolution will suffer. So just to be on safer side, I will go ahead and change the allocation from dynamic to static for private IP of this machine. And after you make any changes to the network interface of any server or client operating system, it is required to reboot it because only reboot will make that change take effect. I'm safe. So once this is done, I will do a reboot once again. Interface got updated. We'll navigate to the VM once again. Look for the status of the VM. The VM is running as we speak. I'll just do a reboot of the VM. All right, the machine got rebooted. I can connect to this VM now. I'm connecting to the VM. Now it's my domain controller server or the VM which is holding Active Directory domain services. All right. So now I'll navigate to Active Directory users and computers. You need to give it some time because we are just using 2 CPU cores. So it probably needs more. That's the reason it is taking time to get started, but that's okay. Okay. In Active Directory users and computers, I'll navigate to my domain users. And here, just to save time, I'll only create 2 users, one for doing the synchronization, other for testing whether the synchronization is working fine. So similar to yesterday, I'll create one user, which is sync admin. This user I will use for synchronizing sync admin, and this user needs enterprise admin credentials. So I'll navigate to enterprise admin security group and add this user as a member. That's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need to provide any other access, only enterprise admin credentials it needs, which I provided to this user. You can see member of enterprise admins. That's it. Next, let's create some sample users to test whether it is testing or not. So I'll say contoso user one. Contoso.user1. So I've created one user, Contoso user one. I'll create one more user. 2 users I'll create, and I'll show you whether they are synchronizing or not. Done. I've got both the users created. Let's create one security group also. Which is Contoso group. And I will have both the users join to this group, user 1 and user 2. So both users 1 and 2, I will have them join to this group. That's it. It's more than sufficient. So we are done with the configuration from the user and group perspective. Now, now we will go ahead and download the Microsoft Entra Connect Sync agent and we will install it. So that's the URL. I can copy it and open a local browser on the server, which is Microsoft Edge that comes with Server 2022 operating system. And I can open this tool, download it. It's downloaded. Now I can install it. Now, what I did last night, when I did this configuration at that point in time, my sync admin was given schema admin access also. But later on, I removed that access and did the reconfiguration. And reconfiguration went successfully. So that was the reason I did not add schema admin role to sync admin user, which is your enterprise admin that will do the configuration. Okay, so we are back on the screen. This is where we need to do the configuration. So I'll click on agree, continue, express settings. I'll provide the credential for a user which has global admin access. You will provide your Entra admin credential. I'll also provide my Entra admin credential for any user that has been granted global admin access. You cannot use your, I'm saying you cannot use your account admin user here with this configuration. It has to be a member user with appropriate rights. It will validate. Oh, it's looking for domain validation successful. It will ask for on-premise user with enterprise admin credentials. You can say it says it needs enterprise admin credentials. The credentials are used to create the local Active Directory account that is used for synchronization, and password has synchronization to assign the correct permissions for the account. So that's what it needs. It only asks for enterprise admin for your Active Directory domain services. So I'll provide the enterprise admin. My domain is contoso / sync admin and the password for this user. Next, if there is any issue, it will let us know. Okay, I'm getting the same error, which says that your Active Directory UPN suffix is contoso.com. However, in Azure AD, in Microsoft Entra, you've not added the suffix. There it is on Microsoft.com. So with this difference, what will happen? Users will not be able to sign into Azure AD with on-premise credentials. So what it says is that users will not be able to use this domain suffix, which is contoso.com. They will need to use the Azure suffix, which is .on Microsoft.com. And password, they can use on premises. That's not a challenge. So I will accept this. I'll say, yes, please continue. Next. And now it is ready to configure. And it says after I'm done with the configuration, I will start the synchronization process when the configuration completes. So I initiated the configuration. That will take another 3 to 5 minutes. And I hope this configuration will be successfully completed as it did last night without any trouble. All right, guys, the configuration completed successfully. You all can see there was absolutely no challenge. It ran really smooth with bare minimum access, which is enterprise admin. We did not give any schema admin access or any additional access. We did not make any changes in the configuration from yesterday. It is the same configuration. So this basically proves that this agent, this new version of agent is more compatible with the newer version of Windows Server operating system, which is Server 2022. If you try to install it on any older version, this version of agent on any older version of server, which is server 2019 or 2016, you may come across some issues for which there is no guidance available on Microsoft documentation, except for the request to connect with paid support so that they can look into it and they can fix it. So that is about synchronization part. Since this configuration is complete, I can exit it from here. I can navigate back to my Azure portal and I will be able to see those two users, which is Contoso user 1 and user 2, along with my sync admin user, along with one additional synchronization user that was created with this configuration, plus a security group with the name Contoso User Security Group available in my Entra ID as part of this exercise, as part of synchronization. So I'll show you that. I navigate to my Azure portal, refresh it, navigate to Entra service, navigate to users, and there we go. Look for yourself. You have Contoso user 1, Contoso user 2, and your sync admin user also here. Sync admin user, these users. The other sync admin is from cloudexpert.in, which is from the old version of agent that I tried working with, which worked. So these are the users. And if you want to validate, you can click on the user. It will show you the time also. It's September 18, 10:06 in the morning today, which is exactly 3 minutes before. So we have the synchronization working perfectly fine. And as part of this synchronization, you will also see the account. This is the account because the account would always have your Active Directory domains services VM name on which the agent is running. So it says sync Windows 2K 2022 ADDS VM. This account is also created. So these are the account which got created. And if you see all of these accounts against all of these accounts in the on-premises enabled column, it says yes, yes, yes. So that is how you know that my synchronization, my hybrid identity use case is perfectly working fine I'm able to synchronize my identities from my on-premises or any third-party identity service provider which uses LDAP and Kerberos authentication to my Microsoft Entra ID. I'll take a pause here and see if you have any questions or if I have any participant who was also doing this exercise along with me and who also confirmed that yes, he or she was also able to do this and he or she is, looking at the same experience.
Hi, Raghuveer. I had a question
Yes, Ishma.
regarding it. So right now, all these OUs that are there in the on-prem are
Uh,
synced, right? So everything will come there, correct?
Absolutely. I'm saying OUs will not sync. OUs never sync.
Okay.
You will sync
Okay.
identities and attributes from OU. Only the
Okay.
users and groups are syncing, right? So if I
Okay.
navigate to groups, you will see the groups also syncing. So I created that Contoso group. I'll show you. If I search for Contoso, you will find this group here, Contoso group, because this group
Hmm.
exists on the domain controller. You can see this group was created today at 10:06 when the
Hmm.
synchronization did. This group has two members. If you want to see members, they are Contoso 1 and Contoso 2. Contoso user 1, user 2. So users and groups synchronize. However, you can decide if you have a specific OU wherein you have added all the users and group that needs to synchronize with Entra ID. You don't want to synchronize all identities. I'm saying in your environment, let's say at your employer, the directory service has more than 400,000 employees. Do they all need access to Azure or cloud? No. Who needs
No.
access to
Hmm.
cloud? Probably limited users, not more than 100,000 users. So what you will do, you will identify those users, create a specific OU. That's what we do in production, like Cloud VU or whatever, Cloud OU, and add all of those users and group to that OU, and then select that OU in the configuration. I'm saying in the custom configuration, so that only the attributes or identities from that OU is synchronized instead of uh, you know, entire domain structure, which includes all the users and groups. Make sense?
Okay. Uh, yeah, I understood, but uh, visualizing it is a little difficult. So,
Yeah, you don't need to visualize it. I will show you. See,
okay.
that's the beauty of technology. As I told you before also, don't just believe on somebody when what he or she says. Ask for evidences. And if the person has confidence, person will show you the evidence. So I'll show you the evidence, which is my custom configuration. I'll talk about some additional use cases here, that what else we can do, what custom configurations are available. Once I'm just waiting for others to complete this activity.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Let's look at some additional options. So we have some terminologies which are password, hash, synchronization, pass-through, authentication, password, writeback. These are the three terminologies that you need to understand along with this process because they are related. So what is password hash synchronization? What is pass-through authentication? What is password writeback? First, I'll explain them theoretically, and then I'll show you in real time also that how these are working. So I'll directly explain them from the documentation. No troubleshooting we need. We need concepts. Okay. Password hash synchronization. I'll put the reference, the documentation also, and put that into the chat window so that you can open it on your system. Now, what is password hash synchronization? Password hash synchronization basically means that when you, so this is the, just try and understand this image. In this image, you can see we have on-premises Active Directory. We have Azure AD Connect. Now you can see that they have not changed their official images also. It still have reference to previous nomenclature. So this is your Microsoft Entra Connect Sync agent. With this Connect Sync agent, you're able to synchronize all user and device identities, all that into Microsoft Entra ID. It says Azure Active Directory, but it's Microsoft Entra ID. And then these users can basically access Microsoft 365, any SaaS application, or any custom application that you have built, your in-house application. So password hash synchronization basically means that password hashes will get synchronized. So which basically means that user will not need to create a separate password when they try and authenticate to M365, any custom app or any SaaS application. So that's what password hash synchronization is. It says password hash synchronization is one of the sign-in methods used to accomplish hybrid identity. Microsoft Entra Connect synchronize a hash of a user password from an on-premises Active Directory instance to a cloud-based Microsoft Entra instance. So in the backend, as part of Connect Sync, you have Microsoft Entra instance, the tenant. In that tenant, users, hash of a user's password will get synchronized. Now it's an extension to directory synchronization feature implemented by Microsoft Entra Connect Sync. You can use this feature to sign into Microsoft Entra services like Microsoft 365. You sign into the service by using the same password you use to sign into your on-premises Active Directory instance. So the password doesn't change. User can sign in with the same password to any user can sign in with the same password to Microsoft Azure portal, Microsoft 365 portal, any SaaS application or custom application that accepts authentication from Entra ID. Authorization could be done by the application itself. That's a different scenario. It's all about authentication because passwords and login credentials are validated during authentication. So that's the concept of password and hash synchronization. Now, it doesn't store the password. It just stores the hash of it. So it says password hash synchronization helps by reducing number of passwords your users need to maintain to just one, which means now your user will not have a separate password for Entra login, separate password for M365, separate password for your custom applications, and separate password for all other SaaS applications that you integrate or federate with. It improves the productivity of your users. Definitely, they will not struggle with remembering the passwords for all the applications. And it also reduces help desk cost because they will not call help desk time and again for helping them with resetting the password, right? It says it also enables leak credential detection on hybrid accounts. Microsoft works alongside with web. This is all talking about the security capability of it. So that's what password hash synchronization is. It says if you want to use it, you need to install Entra Connect, configure directory synchronization, enable password hash synchronization. Now, this is all we have done because by default, when you initiate the directory synchronization between your Active Directory instance and Entra ID instance, password synchronization is by default enabled, right? Now, let's see whether it is working or not. So what we will do, so you already have these two users synchronized here, and I did not create these two users in cloud, and I did not select their password in cloud. What I will show you, I will now log in with these two users, and I show you that these users can log into Entra ID. These users can work on Microsoft Azure subscription, which is attached to this Entra ID. Without creating a new password, they will continue to use their on-premises password. So before you do that, you will need to grant these users some access to Entra or Azure. So I will go ahead and grant these users access. So I'll navigate to any of these users, let's say Contoso user 1, and to this user, I will grant some access so that I can validate whether this user is able to log in.
October 31st is a holiday.
Monisha, go on leave. Sorry, go on mute. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grant this user some access, right? Right now, you can see this user doesn't have any access here. It says eligible assignment, active assignment. Nothing is assigned to this user. I'm not able to assign anything to this user right now from here. Okay, now it is available. Now I'll assign this user, let's say, reader role, which is the least privileged role. So the system is running a bit slow. Now the role is available. So I'll type reader and I'll say I'll assign this user global reader role so that the user can read all the configurations of Entra ID, however, would not be able to make any changes. Next, I'll make it eligible. Assign. So Contoso user 1 has been assigned global reader role in directory. Similarly, I'll navigate to my Azure subscription. In Azure subscription, I will assign this user reader role so that this user can actually read the configuration of Azure, but would not be able to make any changes or provision any service. I'm selecting reader role. I'll select member. I'll select Contoso. User 1. Next, active. Next, assign. So now Contoso 1 user has been assigned global reader and reader RBAC on Microsoft Azure subscription. Now what we will do, we will log in with this user. So I'll open another browser, let's say Microsoft Edge over here. And on Microsoft Edge, I'll go incognito so that if there was any cookie from yesterday, I can get rid of it. Incognito, I have gone to new private window. Here I will try to log in to Azure. And as you already know that if I want to log in, I would need this user UPN. This user would not be able to use contoso.com as UPN as domain suffix. So I will navigate to Entra, navigate to users, Contoso user, copy the user principal name, which is the login name, navigate to Edge here and type the user principal name. Contoso user 1, you can see this is the user that I'm typing. I'll hit next. Now the password that I'm going to type is the one that I created when I created this user in on-premises directory. And you will see that Entra will successfully, happily authenticate this user. That's exactly what password and hash synchronization is. See, user is authenticated. This is just a security prompt to configure MFA. User will say ask later, don't show me again, and user is logged in. So authentication happened successfully. Let's look at the authorization part, whether authorization is working or not. So now the user is authenticated. Now the user will test the authorization. So with this user, I navigate to Entra, go to manage, click on users, since this user has been granted reader role, this user is able to see everything. This user can click on any other user and be able to see the properties. So that reader part is working. However, let's check whether this user is able to create a new user. No, you can see create new user is faded. So authorization is working successfully also. Entra is able to authorize the user with appropriate access that has been granted to it. Let's try that in Azure subscription also. So we navigate to the subscription. Let's say we navigate to virtual machines. User is able to see the virtual machines, which means user is able to read the configuration. Let's try to shut down this virtual machine, my domain controller server, using this user. So I'll click on stop and let's see what happens. There we go. So it says failed. Why? Because this user does not have authorization to perform this action. So which means both authentication and authorization is working successfully for synchronized identities when password and hash synchronization is enabled. That's the concept of password and hash synchronization. Let me know if you have any questions on this capability. Is everyone with me on this?
So, sorry,
Yes, Vishnu.
we have actually synchronized the users and groups, right? And it
Mhm.
automatically will take the password hash synchronization as well.
So when you do the initial configuration, if you remember, I can show it from screenshots. I have them. See, this is where we started. See what it does. By default, it is going to configure enable password hash synchronization as part of this configuration. So by default, when you configure the Active Directory, I'm saying Entra Connect Sync, or when you start with the synchronization, when you hit install, after providing all the authentication, by default, it will enable password hash synchronization. See, if it doesn't enable password hash synchronization, then what is the point of hybrid identity? What is the point of synchronizing users in group to Entra ID when they end up creating separate password for Entra ID as well as any application or workload which is attached with Entra ID? The entire purpose will get defeated. That is the reason password hash synchronization is by default enabled. So any new user that I create now in my on-premises ID, on-premises directory, it will automatically get synchronized to Microsoft Entra ID, and its password, its hash of a password will also get synchronized. And Entra will not store these passwords. It only stores the hashes of it, which is like metadata of it through which it can authenticate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Then the subscription level reader part, and then, okay, there are two roles that was given, right? One at the subscription level and one
One
at
at
the
the
user level.
Entra. Yeah. No, one at the
So,
subscription level, one at the Entra. So there were two roles that were given, Entra ID roles and subscription RBAC. And I have shown you the validation of both, that user is able to only perform the action that user has been authorized to, which is in Entra, user is not able to create any new user because a global reader cannot create a user. In subscription, the user is not able to shut down the virtual machine because user only has reader role. For virtual machine shutdown capability, user need contributor role, virtual machine contributor role.
there's another question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, ask
Okay.
as many questions that you can, unless and until you feel yourself satisfied.
So, we had given at the Entra level an eligible assignment, right? It's not an active assignment, correct?
No, I selected active, not eligible. Why we are getting that option eligible and active? Because we have P2 license enabled. And because of P2 license, they're adding that feature. Every time I'm granting some access to any user, I'm getting that view because I have P2 license enabled on my directory. If you don't have P2 license enabled on your directory, you will not get that view. It will directly, make the assignment as active. You only get eligible or you only get that view because now that you have P2 license enabled, P2 provides you privileged identity management capability wherein you can decide whether you want to grant an eligible access that needs to be elevated every time user needs to perform an elevated activity, or whether you want to grant a active assignment. And that is why, if you remember, when I said I want to grant active, it asked me for justification. So I'll show you once again. This is another user, Contoso user 2. I'll go to assign roles. Here I will assign another role to user. And it will ask me the same question for justification.
So in what scenario is where that considering the the enterprise has this P2 license, when is that this eligible part will come into picture? Or is there a workflow related to when you do an eligible assignment and when it has to be made active?
No. That's privileged identity management concept, PIM service, that we will do in this training, probably by the end of this week or maybe early next week. Then you will understand this concept. Right now, understand this, that if I select any role, if I select any privileged role, right? So if I select, let's say, global admin role, right? I'm selecting global admin role. Entra understands that global admin is a privileged role. So when I click on next, I get this screen. It says assignment type, eligible or active. Eligible means that the user is eligible for this role, and I can also decide for how long. I'm saying for 1 month, for 6 months. It can be a maximum of 6 months, minimum of 8 hours. So user is eligible. That is the right configuration as per the best practice. If I say active, active means user will permanently have this role. There will not be any end date, and that is where it is asking me for justification. So Entra understands that this is not as per the best practice. You are assigning a user global admin role, which is a privileged role, and that too as active. This is against the best practice. And now that you have P2 license, you can take advantage of privileged identity management service, wherein you can configure all of it. You can provide just-in-time access to your users to all the privileged roles so that they don't maintain privileged access all the time. And this will also reduce the security incidents. Imagine if I grant you privileged access role, if I grant global admin role to Reshma, what if your identity is compromised? My entire system will get compromised because your identity has highest privilege role. But instead of granting you a global admin role permanently, if I only grant you global admin role when you need to perform some action, when you need to perform an activity that needs global admin role, and that too for half an hour. In that way, the hacker will only get that half an hour window to hack into your account. And if hacker is not able to hack into your account or compromise your account in that half an hour, then after half an hour, you will be back as a regular user. So I'm reducing the chances of security incident in my environment by granting time bound and by granting just in time privileged role to identities as and when they need to perform some activity. Now, when I grant this global admin role to you, I will also put one workflow of approval. I will add one approval workflow here. You will not be able to use global admin role unless and until it is approved by your manager or it is approved by identity admin or Entra admin, because this is a highest privilege role. So we want to make sure that we are aware that you are elevating your access, you are becoming a global admin to perform certain activity. So we will need, you will, I'm saying when you elevate, we will get an email, we will need to approve it. You will provide the justification why you are elevating it. If we feel that that justification is okay, this is actually needed, you're going to work on a change request that requires some configuration changes for which you need that role, then as an admin or as your manager, I will approve that request. And as soon as I approve it, and while approving it, I will also decide for how long you will need that role. I can reduce, I'm saying, when you elevate, you will say I need it for 4 hours. While I approve, I can change that duration and say, no, half an hour is more than sufficient for this work. And I will approve it, reduce the time frame to half an hour so that you can only have that role for half an hour. Once that half an hour period is over and your activity is not completed, you will further send elevation request. I will receive it once again with another justification of yours that why were you not able to complete it? Then I will further either deny that request or approve it and then give you another half an hour or 1 hour. So this entire workflow is configured in privileged identity management service that we will do by the end of this week or next week.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you ask questions, you actually help others who keep mum all the time, who don't ask questions, who probably don't have courage to ask questions, or who don't understand the concept and hence they don't know what to ask. But it helps them because in future they may come across the same issue and they will probably remember what was the answer, or they can refer to the recorded session and get to the answer. So when you ask questions, feel privileged that you are helping others. Don't feel as if you are irritating someone else. And I'm somebody who never gets irritated. Okay, let's move on, guys. So that was password and hash synchronization. Now, another capability that we need to talk about is here. So let's say this is my Contoso user and I'm the Entra admin. You know, I'm the administrator of Entra and I want to change the password of this user. Or this user approaches me and says that, hey, you know what, I'm not able to log in. It says username or password is incorrect. So I ask the person, what username are you typing? The person gives me the same username and I confirm that yes, username is right. Then probably the password is incorrect. Now I cannot see the password. Nobody can see the password of a user. So what I will do, I will reset the password. Let's see whether I'm able to reset the password or not. Read the error carefully. It says, unfortunately, you cannot reset this user's password because password writeback is not enabled in your tenant. So I introduce another concept, which is password writeback. Okay, by mistake, I added the notes on this document. So I'll take it from here. And put it here. Okay, password writeback. Password authentication, we will do next. So what is password writeback feature? When enabled, Entra admins can reset password for identities which are synchronized from on-premises AD. That's password writeback feature. If you enable this feature, Entra admin can reset password for identities which are synchronized from on-premises AD. They can further configure Entra admins. They can further configure self-service password reset, which is known as SSPR capability for these identities, these on-premise identities. Before I show you how this feature works, let me show you another thing. So this is one user which is synchronized from on-premises. And as an admin, I'm not able to change this user password. However, I can delete this user whenever I want. I can delete this user and it will further get synchronized because the synchronization service is running in the backend. Now let's see the behavior for other user. Now this user, let's say Farhan Ahmed. You can see this user. This is not synchronized from on-premises. This is a cloud identity. I'm saying I've created this user in cloud. If I navigate to Farhan Ahmed and if I reset password, I can quickly reset password of Farhan Ahmed. It doesn't stop me. It says the user will be assigned a temporary password that must be changed on the next login. The moment I click on reset, it would give me a temporary password that I share with Farhan, and Farhan will be able to use that temporary password to create his or her new password. So what did you notice here? You notice that for on-premise synchronized identities, you will not be able to change the password. Why? Because password is not getting saved. So one user, one participant asked once that where can we see the hashes which are getting synchronized from on-premises? I said, I can't show you because it's a SaaS service. I exactly don't know where the storage is and I don't have access to the storage. Probably Microsoft in the backend can see it, but I can prove it that they are not storing password. This is how I proved it right now. If Microsoft Entra was storing the password, it was able to reset it. But since it was not able to reset it, it clearly says that writeback is not enabled. It means that Microsoft Entra is not storing the password. Password still continues to get stored in on-premises Active Directory services, and hence you cannot change it unless you enable an additional feature, which is known as password writeback. This is an enable additional feature, right? So that's about password writeback. Then comes another feature, which is pass-through authentication. Any question on password writeback, guys? I will configure this feature and show you also, but I'm just trying to complete both the options together, because every time you need to change the configuration or you need to customize the configuration, you will need to go through the entire configuration cycle again. So to save time, I am trying to complete both the features together. And these are two important features that you need to be aware as hybrid identity administrator. The role who is responsible for managing the synchronization is known as hybrid identity administrator. And this is a privileged role. You will only get this role when you are there in the system for a long time, or when you have been into Entra space or identity and access management space for a long time, and you probably work at SME or L3 position. Okay, let's talk about pass-through authentication. Now, what is happening now what I will do, I will shut down my VM, my domain controller VM. Sorry, I don't need to delete it. I'll shut down this VM. See, theory you can read from documentation. I'm telling you the capability and the use case of that capability actually. So you can see I've shut down the VM and I lost the remote control because the VM is shut down. We'll wait for the VM to shut down. Give me a moment. Somebody's at the door. I'll be right. All right, I'm back. So did you notice that the virtual machine is stopped now? The domain controller VM is stopped now, which basically means that the synchronization service is stopped. In a production environment, you will have multiple domain controllers. And you don't usually shut down your Active Directory servers. Nobody does that in a production environment. But I did that so that I can show you one capability and I can prove that how that capability works so that you understand the concept. So I have shut down this VM. Now I'll try to log in with another user. I'm already logged in with Contoso user 1. So I will probably log out and sign back again with Contoso user 1 or Contoso user 2. It hardly makes any difference. So I'm signing back once again. I'll type the password. And user is able to sign in. User is able to sign in. What does this tell you? This basically tells me that once user identity is synchronized in Entra, even though it's an on-premise identity, and if on-premise environment is not up and running, if there is any connectivity issue, if there is any outage which is happening, if on-premise identity server or on-premise directory service, which is your Active Directory domain service, even though if it is not available, users will still be able to sign in, authenticate and authorize to Entra and any cloud application or any custom or internal application that accepts authentication from Entra. Any third-party application, SaaS application. So once users are synchronized, there is absolutely no dependency on on-premise services. Is everyone with me on this or not? I can show you for another user. You will probably say that this information was already there in the system, in the browser. So that's the reason user was able to log in. No worries. Let's log in with another user, which is Contoso user 2. So I'll copy the user and I'll log in with Contoso user 2. And I never logged in with this user in this session. Okay, I typed the incorrect password. I'll type it correct now. I forgot, I believe. Give me a moment here. So I forgot the password for this user basically. Was it 9835? No, I forgot the password for this user. This user can very well sign in, and so you don't get confused. I can prove it from another user. There is more users which are synchronized. We have sync admin user also synchronized. We log in with sync admin. So this is sync admin user, which got also synchronized. You can see September 18th this morning. I log in with this user. See, I'm able to log in. So it proves that there is absolutely no dependency on on-premise directory services. Once password and hash synchronization is enabled, once users are successfully synchronized in Microsoft Entra ID. Is everyone with me on this statement? You're looking at this screen because I have not granted any access to sync admin. That's the reason sync admin says you don't have any subscription. And sync admin will not be able to see anything because you've not granted any access. Yep.
So right now the connection to AD server is down, right?
Absolutely. My AD server is down.
Okay. So what would be the status of the users then? It was
I'm saying you
on-prem
can see the
enabled.
users are able to log in.
Yeah, I got that.
See.
How about the groups? How will the groups be affected when?
How will the groups? There is no impact on the group. Group is nothing but a container.
So that will be there because the sync has broken, right?
Yeah, group, everything will be there. I'm saying group is here. See, Contoso group is here. It's here. It continues to have those two members, direct members, which is Contoso 1 and Contoso 2. There is no impact. And users are able to sign in. The reason I was not able to sign in with user 2 because I probably forgot the password or I typed it incorrect. But with sync admin, I was able to sign in. And sync admin is also one of the user that is coming from on-premises.
Okay, so in the list of users, what is the status then of the?
The status will remain the same. There is no change on the status. You can see this is the list of users. These are the users.
It's still on-prem synced only. I mean, I was looking the on-prem.
It may affect only before if we. I guess it will be affected when we want to sync with on premises. Once again.
Come again, Naeem. What are you saying? It will be affected when?
I guess it may be affected when if we want to sync the new user from the on premises.
New users will not sync. How will they sync? Your directory service is stopped. The
Yeah, directory
directory
service is
service.
stopped.
Huh.
If there is any one, yeah, directory is yeah, okay, yeah, I got.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's logical. Your directory
So
services are
and
down. So
Raghu,
nothing
I
is
Entra
think
nothing
Sync
is
is
the
hard.
synchronized. Yeah, one by one, guys. Yes,
I think
Reshma.
the question Reshma was asking is like if you have stopped the AD services, right? Then how the
Hmm.
users? So these users will sync before you stop the services.
Absolutely.
So that's why
Absolutely.
they're still.
Right. So any new user will not synchronize because directory services are stopped. And in a production environment, you will not find an instance where somebody will stop the domain controllers. And in a production environment, you will not have one domain controller. You will have multiple domain controller. So even if one domain controller goes down, the other will continue to run and users will continue to synchronize from that domain controller if your domain controller replication is working fine. So domain controller replicate internally. If that replication is working fine, your users will continue to synchronize even if one of the domain controller is down. However, the domain controller which is hosting Microsoft Entra Connect Sync agent service, if that domain controller is down, then synchronization will not work because that agent is the bridge here. That agent is doing the synchronization. If agent is down, synchronization will not happen. Users who are already synchronized, they will have no impact in their behavior, in their experience. They will continue to access the services without any trouble. But users who are not synchronized, definitely they don't exist here. So they can't sign into any service which is attached to Entra. That's the concept. And why did I do this? So that I can talk about the another capability, which is pass-through authentication. Now, what is this pass-through authentication? So in some environments, we want to have a single centralized identity, which is meant for authentication and authorization. We want to have a centralized identity. Centralized identity service meant for both authentication, authentication only, not for authorization. Authorization is always the application to which you're authorizing. So centralized identity service meant for authentication and for all policies. For all policies implementation. If you have this requirement that you want to have centralized identity service meant for both authentication and for all policies implementation, policies example, let's say password policy. Now my on-premises password policy is different because that is configured in my on-premises Active Directory. My Entra password policy is different. Now imagine if I enable password writeback functionality with which I'm able to change the password of user in Entra. Is there a guarantee that I will be in sync with the on-premise policy because this user is an on-premise identity? No, there could be a mismatch. Similarly, there could be other policies also that you want to enforce on users from on-premises only. So in that scenario, where you want to continue using your on-premises directory service for centralized identity service for both authentication and policies implementation. I'm just taking one example password. There could be n number of examples. For all policies implementation, configure pass-through authentication. In short, PTA, we configure pass-through authentication. What will happen in pass-through authentication? Every time an identity is trying to sign in, an on-premises synchronized identity is trying to authenticate to Entra or any other service or on-premises service, it will get the authentication from on-premises directory, which basically means that your domain controller, your Active Directory service must be up and running. Any one domain controller must be available. If you have 4 domain controllers in your environment or 20 domain controllers, one of the domain controller must be available for authentication. Otherwise, user will not be able to authenticate, which is exactly opposite of what I did. Right now, my users are able to authenticate. These users, sync admin, Contoso users, they're able to log into Entra, and with Entra, they are able to perform any activity to which they are authorized to, even though the on-premises directory is shut down. Right? Now I will show you the opposite of it. If when I configure pass-through authentication, if on-premises directory is shut down, users will not be able to log in because they will not find an authentication server. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, Raghuveer.
Great.
Yes.
Let's understand the concept. Now, when you go through Microsoft documentation, sometimes it's too much, it's overwhelming, and sometimes it is also misleading. So, pass-through authentication. You can go through this documentation. This exactly talks about the same thing, but probably they will use a different language, a language that will not make sense. And I'm trying to keep it to the point by showing you the exact use case in real time so that you understand, so that you don't just understand it, you also see from your own eyes and you believe it forever that I've seen it from my eyes that yes, this is how it is done. And that too on a recorded session. So this is your pass-through authentication. If you read this documentation, you will get a lot of information, but I have told you the crux of it. It says Microsoft Entra Pass-Through Authentication allows your users to sign into both on-premise and cloud-based applications using the same password, which is true. I'm saying it is still the case in password and hash authentication. It is the same case. So there is nothing changing here. It says this feature allowed your users a better experience, one less password to remember, and reduce IT help desk cost. This is all bullshit because you already know that I'm able to sign in with sync admin user in cloud when pass-through is not configured. And I can also sign in with sync admin user in on-premises if it has appropriate access to any application that gets authenticated with on-premises directory or even the domain controller. Are you with me on this statement? That my on-premises user is able to sign into both cloud systems and on-premises systems? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Yes, Raghu.
So this entire language is of no use. Microsoft is confusing you. Understand the actual use case of pass-through authentication. The actual use case of pass-through authentication is that when pass-through authentication is enabled, the authentication will be done by on-premises directory. When users try to sign in, they will be sent to on-premises authentication. You can see this is the user. They're trying to sign in. They're trying to sign into Azure, portal.azure.com. And what is happening? Look at these dotted lines. As Entra ID is not able to allow them sign in, Entra is actually sending that request to pass-through agent. Pass-through agent is nothing but the server, Active Directory server, which is working as an agent. And that pass-through agent is basically is basically confirming the credentials of the user, and then user is able to sign in to Entra or any third-party apps. That's the concept of pass-through. So every time user will sign in, the pass-through authentication, if configured, the request will be sent to pass-through agent, which is nothing but a domain controller server on which pass-through is configured. That domain controller server will basically confirm that yes, user credentials are correct and user will be able to sign in to Entra or any application. So this image shows it on. And you will see it somewhere on this documentation where it exactly tells you that if pass-through is enabled, then your servers must be available at all time. Just read it here. It's a lengthy documentation, but I've told you the crux of this service, which allows the same password for users in on-premises and in Azure. So let's configure both the capabilities together. Now I will turn on my domain controller VM. We'll wait for a minute till this VM comes on. And this is the last topic on hybrid identity synchronization. After this, we will move on to the next topic. And if you want to understand all of these capabilities in detail, you can refer to my Microsoft Defender XDR training, training playlist. There is a video number 3 in which I'm talking about all these synchronization along with theoretical as well as hands-on experience, the way I'm doing it. It's just that there I am doing it in detail because that training involved those topics and I almost spent the entire day covering all of those topics. Okay, in this training, I'm saying this entire synchronization is not part of SC300. This is an additional request that came from your management that they want me to cover these concepts with respect to synchronization, pass-through, write-back, password-less synchronization, and all custom configuration with respect to the synchronization part, so that if you ever get to work in this domain, you will have the right level of knowledge to do the work. Okay, so the server is up and running. Once again, I will need to connect to the server because this is where I'm hosting my Entra Connect service. So I'll connect to the server. It's connecting. Since it's server 2022 configured with less resources, it takes time. All right, let's move on. And guys, unless you practice it yourself, you will not remember it, though you will have good clarity on the concept. But I would still request you to practice it yourself in your spare time. And if things do not work as expected, just make a note of it, take a screenshot, and probably discuss it with me at the beginning of the trading session, as I always say. All right. So if I need to make any changes to my synchronization service, when I say synchronization service, it basically means Entra Connect service. I will need to click on this agent. Hope my screen is visible to everyone. Okay. Now, while you are making changes, while you are doing any configuration changes, the synchronization service will stop. It will not work while you are there on the screen. So if there are more users which are getting created on other domain controllers, in a production environment, you will have multiple domain controllers and you can create users on any domain controller which has an FSMO role available on it, right? So if you are creating users on other domain controllers, they will not synchronize till the time you have this box open, till the time you are doing this activity. Once this activity is complete, then only synchronization will resume. So remember this statement. So it says synchronization is suspended until the setup wizard is closed. Now, what else we can configure? We can click on configure and we see all the tasks here. These are all the tasks. I have explained all of them in detail in Defender XDR training. You can go through that training session and you will see all of these capabilities. Right now, let's focus on what we need to cover. So we will click on this option. Now, to answer Reshma, your question, that how do I see which all OUs are getting synchronized? If I want to synchronize a specific OU, this is where you do it. So you basically click on customize synchronization options here. And when you click on customize, whenever you try to look into any configuration, it would ask you to authenticate first of all. So you should be ready with authentication credentials, which basically means that nobody can compromise the service. So I need to provide my global admin credentials first, because I'm trying to do some configuration changes. It's verify whether I am the rightful owner, whether these credentials are correct. When synchronization service stops, this is another troubleshooting. Sometimes when, as per your password policy, your credential changes, your password changes, then the synchronization service stops because it requires a new password. So here you can see right now what is getting synchronized. Right now, contoso.com is getting synchronized. If I want to synchronize additional domains or additional directories, I can add them here. So I can click on add directory and I can add additional directories also. But once again, I will need to provide that directory information. So since I don't have additional domains here to synchronize, I will directly go to this domain and show you what else I can synchronize or how I can filter synchronization. I'll click on next. And here you can see right now what is getting synchronized. Sync all domains and OU. This is what is getting synchronized right now. So from this domain, everything is getting synchronized. If I want to have a specific OU to synchronize, I will select the second radio button that will enable this arrow. When you click on this arrow, you will see this. So what is getting synchronized right now? This. If I want a specific OU to get synchronized, let's say in my directory, I will create a separate OU with the name Cloud VU, and I only want that OU to get synchronized. I will uncheck all of it, and I will have that OU selected only. And then only that OU will get synchronized. All the identities, which includes users and groups, as well as devices information, that will get synchronized. That's the concept here. Reshma, does that answer your question?
The last part I got a little bit confused. So right now you have removed the synchronization for all the OUs, right? So ideally,
No,
it
I'm
would
just telling
stop,
you.
right? Syncing.
No, I'm just telling you that this is the place where you can configure what you want to synchronize. I'm just showing you that you can remove it also.
Okay.
Obviously, these are default OUs. You will never remove it because these are default OUs. My domain controller is plain default domain controller with only 2 users and 1 group. In a production environment, you will have hundreds of OUs. You will have Active Directory sites and services. You will have multiple configurations. So what I'm trying to show here is that this is the default view. By default, this is what gets synchronized. By default, it synchronizes everything. It synchronizes all domains and all OUs. And from OUs, it synchronizes users, devices, and groups. But if you have a requirement wherein you only want to synchronize a specific OU, not all the OUs, then you can select the OU here. I'm saying this list will increase. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, I never leave any person in confusion. Let's close this. Let's go ahead and create one OU so that you will start to see it there. This will just, extend this topic, but that's okay. I will probably expect you to stay back or have an additional day of session because I need to complete all the topics. So let's go to Active Directory users and computers. And here I'll create one more OU. New OU. I'm creating this OU, Cloud VU. So this OU is created. I'll close it. Refresh the system. And I'll open this service once again. Now, sometimes you do things so fast that it takes time to synchronize. Okay. See, as soon as I close that system, because synchronization runs in real time. As soon as I close that box, it started synchronization. Now, while synchronization service is running, I will not be able to make any configuration changes. So I will need to wait till this synchronization is complete. This will get completed very quickly. Why? Because I don't have any additional attributes or identities created in my directory, in the last half an hour. So it will quickly complete. It says what you do next, close this AD Connect wizard and stop the AD Connect synchronization scheduler before changing your configuration. If I want this to, I'm saying if I don't want to wait, I can close the synchronization scheduler service from services.msc, which is not recommended by Microsoft, because if you interrupt the synchronization service, it may get corrupted. And if it happens, then you will have no option but to reconfigure it all over again or approach Microsoft so that they can see the logs in the backend, find out which registry entry got corrupted, and they can fix it by taking remote of your system. So that's what we can do. So we'll wait for a minute till that synchronization completes. Great. Synchronization is suspended. Basically, it got completed. I'll click on configure once again, customize synchronization options. Next, type the credentials. I'll say next, and there we go. I'll select the other radio button and say next. And you will see your cloud view here. See, by default, cloud view is also syncing because the default setting is to sync all domains and OU. However, now if you want to do a custom configuration wherein you don't want to sync everything from your directory because it contains a lot of information which may be overwhelming or not needed in cloud, then you can select this OU. I'm saying you can uncheck this user OU because user OU will contain all the users, right? It contains all users in group. You can uncheck this OU and you can manually move users from users OU to cloud BU OU that you want to synchronize with cloud. And only the users and identities, users and groups and devices from this OU will get synchronized in cloud. So that way you can do a custom configuration where when you don't want to synchronize everything from on-premises, you want to pick and choose what you want to synchronize. And the rest of the OUs are default OUs. They're always checked. Even if you want to uncheck them, you can also uncheck them. But this is not recommended by Microsoft. Otherwise, the synchronization service may get affected because these are default OUs. I hope now that answers your question and you have clear visibility that how we do it.
Raghuveer, I do have a query here. So whatever be the changes which we are doing in the on-prem side, so will it instantly get synced to the Entra ID as well? Or is there any default time for the synchronization?
When this service was introduced in its initial phases a couple of years ago, there used to be a time frame which is 30 minutes. They reduced it to 15 minutes. Now it is real time. The Connect Sync agent works in real time as long as synchronization service is up and running, as long as it has clear line of sight to Entra ID, which means there is no connectivity networking issue from the server. It's in real time. So the moment you are done with any configuration changes, let's say if I uncheck this user's OU and select this cloud BU OU, which doesn't have even a single user, if I just go ahead with this configuration and hit submit, it will further synchronize once again, and all my users which are in cloud, they will disappear automatically. Why? Because in cloud BU, I don't have any user. All the users are in users OU, my Contoso 1, Contoso 2, and my sync admin user. They are in users OU. And I am unchecking this users OU and selecting another OU which doesn't have anything. So if I just go with this configuration, and if I just click on next here, what it will do now at this step, if I just say configure, you can see what will happen. It will update Contoso connector. This is the connector which it is using, and it will configure the synchronization service and it will start the synchronization. So whatever changes I'm making here, those changes will start to synchronize And since I have unchecked user OU, all my synchronized users will now disappear from Entra, because when this service goes to Entra, it will see some additional identities synchronized which are not needed. It will disappear. So it is not that they are deleted. They will disappear because nothing is permanently written in Entra. It's all synchronization which is happening. So Entra is not writing anything in its permanent memory that it will get deleted. So that's the concept here. So every time you make the configuration changes, it does the synchronization. It synchronizes those changes. So I will not do this. Otherwise, it will take another 20 to 30 minutes to come back to the screen and do the topic. Let's understand what I want to cover here. So this is where you see all the options. Some additional features like password writeback. If I want to enable password writeback, I can enable it from here, right? So I can enable password writeback and see what this does. By enabling password writeback, password changes that originate with Azure AD will be written back to your on-premises directory. In other words, you will be able to change password of identities which are synchronized from on-premises to Entra ID. That's password writeback. So this is where you enable password writeback. You can also enable group writeback. Group writeback basically means that it says, you can also enable group writeback, which does the same thing. If you have any group synchronized and if you are changing the group properties, they will also reverse synchronize. Typically, Entra doesn't allow you to change the group properties, but you can also change the group properties. I'm saying, like, let's say there are 2 users in your group. That Contoso group has 2 users, Contoso user 1 and user 2. By default, it will not allow me to add users to that group because that is a group which is synchronizing from on-premises. So if I want to make any changes to the group membership, that has to be done in the on-premises. But if I enable this group writeback also, then I can also add users in Entra ID to that group. I can also make group changes configuration and Entra will happily accept it, write it back to on-premises so that it reflects the same information there. That's the concept here. Make sense? Then you have another capability, which is directory extension attribute sync. These are some additional capabilities. The most important capability that you need to know is password hash synchronization, password writeback, and group writeback. That's the capability. So I'll go
why
back.
the pass-through authentication is not listing here?
That is not here.
Feature.
That was for Reshma. Now this is for everyone. For pass-through authentication, you need to click on here, which is change user sign-in. This is the place. So if I want to configure pass-through authentication, I will go to this place. Okay. Over here, you see pass-through authentication. You can see password as synchronization is enabled and pass-through authentication is here. So the second radio button. This is pass-through authentication. It says pass-through authentication enables Azure Active Directory to authenticate users using your on-premises directory infrastructure. That's exactly what I started this topic with. So when this service is enabled, when this capability is enabled, Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Entra ID will send authentication request to on-premises identity service and say, I've got this user trying to sign in. Please verify if the user password is correct. The on-premise service will say, yes, it is correct, and user will be able to log in. If on-premises service is not available, you will get an error stating that the service is not available. That's the concept here. So I will enable pass-through authentication. Okay, I need to go back to previous. I just changed the settings, so I will just do it once again. Okay, no, let me close it and redo it. Now, every time you close it, it will try to synchronize. Since there was nothing, so I will configure it once again. So change user sign in. Next, I will type the password here. Next. examining domains. Okay, this is the default view. So you can see password hash synchronization is enabled. Now I will enable pass-through authentication. See the difference. The moment I enabled pass-through authentication, password hash synchronization got disabled automatically because they are two contradicting features. Since password hash synchronization is disabled at this moment, now no user will be able to authenticate using Entra because Entra doesn't have a hash. So Entra has no option but to go back to on-premises directory and say, I have got this user trying to sign in. Here's the username that I can validate. I have it, but I don't have a password hash. And here's the password that the user is supplying. Can you please validate if this password is correct? So the on-premises directory will say, correct, user will be allowed to sign in. Incorrect, user will get an error that password or username is incorrect. That's the concept. Make sense? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's do this. So I'll configure it.
So when is this password authentication come into use uh, in a real scenario? Because would it
I
be
told
easier to basically take the PHS than the
no.
password
So
authentication?
that's what I'm trying to say.
Password.
Pass-through authentication will come into the picture. See, first of all, pass-through authentication is an I'm saying. So do you understand the concept of Active Directory Federation services? So pass-through authentication is an advanced feature of ADFS. We don't use ADFS in cloud anymore. Instead of ADFS, we can use pass-through authentication, wherein the users will get synchronized to cloud, but their passwords and all their governing policies will continue to remain on premises. And every time you need to make the changes in the governing policies or passwords of the user, it will be done from on premises. So this basically supports centralized identity concept. And with centralized identity concept, you will not have Entra playing any role here. In password hash synchronization, Entra is playing a role because in Entra, you are storing the password hashes of the user. So Entra is able to authenticate, which means you have two authentication services. One is on premises, one is Entra. So if you want to continue with your on premises directory as authentication service, because you are heavily invested into on premises and all your people understands on premises, they don't understand Entra configuration, but you have Entra in picture because some applications are in cloud. You're using Azure cloud. That is where you need to continue with Entra. Then you will configure pass-through authentication. With pass-through authentication, each authentication request will come to on-premises identity for authentication. The other benefit, as I told you, password policies. Now Entra has its own password policy. On-premise domain controller has its own password policy. When user synchronizes in cloud, when password hash is enabled, when password writeback capability is enabled, you can change the password of the user from cloud. And when you change the password, there is a high probability that it will not be in sync with on-premises password policy, which what it means that you will have varying level of passwords not amounting to password policy, which is a statutory guideline leakage. I'm saying if you have ISO 27017 or other compliances to be met, then you should have a uniform password policy across the environment. So when auditor comes, auditor will know that they need to check this configuration. The moment they will see this configuration, they will give you a red mark stating that you don't have a uniform password policy. Your Entra policy is different. Your on-premise policy is different. Your user happens to have two different password policies. So to summarize this, we use pass-through authentication in a scenario wherein we want to use cloud services, but we don't want to manage configuration in cloud. We want to continue managing configuration in on-premises. That is where we use pass-through authentication. Pass-through authentication is an advanced version of Active Directory Federation services. That's what pass-through authentication is. All right. So now that we are enabling pass-through authentication, it says that please provide credentials. So I will need to provide credentials. So I provided the credentials. Okay. Now my sysadmin user is only an enterprise admin. And since I'm enabling pass-through authentication, it requires a domain admin credentials. Because now Entra will approach domain admin user all the time, or Entra will communicate with domain admin user to seek password information or any configuration information from on-premises directory. So what I need to do to have this working, I will navigate to my directory, and I will need to grant sync admin domain admin role also, or I will need to use another user which has domain admin rights. So I will navigate to users and computers. Users, here I have sync admin. I will make sync admin a member of domain admins group also. No, not administrator. Domain admins. Okay. Apply. Okay. So now I can use this user for pass-through authentication because this is also a domain admin. However, I will not be able to do it here because you need to close this tab, close the agent and open it once again because it may not be able to synchronize while it is up and running. Let's see if it works. Otherwise, we'll do it. Okay, let's see. No, it says Contoso's sync admin is not a domain admin credential for contoso.com. So I will need to close this and I will need to redo it once again. Configure, change user sign in. Next, type the password. Next. Now, in the same example, I am enabling both the configurations. This user signing is optional already configured, which is okay. So I'm enabling pass-through authentication. Next. Now it will work. All right. It worked, you can see, because I have granted domain admins permissions to sync admin user that Entra will now use to communicate with on-premises directory. So what it is going to do, this is going to enable pass-through authentication. It is going to, with pass-through authentication, it is going to enable single sign-on, and it starts the synchronization process when the configuration completes. So I will configure it. It's enabling it now, enabling single sign-on. Okay. It says password has synchronization is enabled. In addition to your current sign-in method, run the customized synchronization options. This is just a gap in the UI. We have actually enabled pass-through authentication now. So don't bother about the message that comes. All right. So pass-through authentication is enabled. How do I know that pass-through authentication is enabled? That's the another question. You don't ask. I will ask questions as if I'm one of the participants. So in your directory, you will see that configuration. When you click on Microsoft Entra Connect service, when you click on Connect Sync, you will see what is enabled, what is not enabled here, right? So here it will say pass-through authentication in some time. Okay, over here. See, pass-through authentication enabled 2 agents. I will click here. Why it says 2 agents? Because I also have my other directory getting synchronized from Windows Server 2019 with the old agent, which is this, which I did activity, right? So that it just removed, because that is, so these are the services here. You can see pass-through authentication is enabled with this service. And this is another server that I created last night. And with this server, I did entire 2022 testing. That's what I confirmed this morning, that it is perfectly working fine on 2022, all the capabilities. So now that this is enabled, I just need to make sure that this is synchronized. So what is my IP address for the current server? It should not take the previous server. In lab environment, when you do a lot of changes so frequently, sometimes things do not work as expected. So this is the IP address 147.46. This should be here. Okay, 147.46, which is good. So this is my pass-through authentication. Now, what is this known as? This is known as agent. So if you go back to the same documentation which I was sharing for pass-through authentication and look at this image, this is the agent, pass-through authentication agent. So this agent is nothing but a domain controller server, which is configured for pass-through authentication or where your Entra Connect Sync service is running. In a production environment, sometimes we don't run Entra Connect service on a domain controller. We run it on a member server. It's a decision only. So this is my agent. Now, what Microsoft is trying to say as a best practice, Microsoft is saying that we recommend that you have a minimum of 3 authentication agents running on your tenant. Why it says a minimum of 3? Because right now I have a single point of failure. If my domain controller, I'm saying if this VM is down, all the users who are synchronized from on-premises, they will not be able to sign in. They will not be able to sign in to Microsoft Entra, to Azure portal, to M365, to any application that authenticates with Entra. That is why this VM is a single point of failure. In a production environment, you will have multiple domain controllers. So Microsoft says that you should have a minimum of 3 authentication agents. When you configure pass-through authentication in a production environment, all the domain controllers with a specific FSMO role, they will be listed here automatically because they will all act as an agent. The domain controller, I'm saying you will see some domain controllers on the top and some at the bottom. There is the logic here is when you see a long list, the logic here is that the one on the top will be the primary agent that Entra will approach. If that agent is not available, it will approach the second one or the third one in the list like that. That's how it will happen. So this is the pass-through authentication configuration that you can check here. That's where you see. Now let's test this configuration. So I will go back to the Microsoft Edge where I have sync admin user signed in. I will sign out from this user. I've signed out. I don't remember the password for Contoso 2, but Contoso 1 I remember. So first I will log in with Contoso 1 user. Now you cannot see whether pass-through authentication is working because Microsoft will not show you in the UI, but in the backend it is actually doing it. That you can verify from the URL. You will see the URL changing and pointing towards on-premises service, but it's a long URL. You will not be able to notice it. However, when I shut down the server, then you will notice that service was actually working. And now that the server is not there, see, that's what is happening. So it says sign in failed. Why is the sign in failed? Because the Azure AD Connect authentication agent, I'm saying why it failed, because now the pass-through authentication is enabled and the server is probably not available. So my server, now why this is failing? Because of this. Because of this, it is failing. I have this entry. So what is happening? It is trying to reach to this entry, and at this entry, it is failing. These are two different domains, two different configurations, and unfortunately, this server is not available. So I will need to get this entry removed, then only this entry will work. That's the reason my authentication is failing, because it is passed through, and by default, the service is going to this. Entra ID is trying to communicate with this server, but does not exist. This is Contoso domain, and this is Contoso 2S. I'm saying this is the current domain that I have, and this is a domain that I tested last night. So since this entry is still there in my system, because of that, my authentication stopped working. I'm not able to sign in with this user, and I'm not getting user password denied error. I'm getting this error, which confirms that the pass-through authentication is working. If I try with the other user, sync admin, let's say, I will get the same error. See, same error. So pass-through authentication is working. And why it is not working even though my server is up and running on premises? Because there is a stale entry in the configuration. That entry is causing this issue. So I will need to have that stale entry removed, and it takes up to 24 hours for that entry to get removed. If I want to do it myself, it will take up to 24 hours. Or if I want to get help from Microsoft, they can remove it from the backend right then and there. In a production environment, this will not be the scenario, because in production environment, you will not do this type of activities. You will not have multiple different domains from different forests synchronized like this. Make sense? So I cannot get rid of this entry actually by myself. Microsoft doesn't give you an option to fix it. It automatically gets fixed. It automatically gets removed within 24 hours. However, if you were doing the configuration along with me, you can test it on your system. It will perfectly work fine when this service is up and running. When you shut down your domain controller VM and then try to sign in, you will get the same error as I'm getting for this user. It will give you the same error that it was not able to do the authentication. So any participant who has done this configuration can share the screen and show it to the rest of the participant, the same experience. Anyone who has done the configuration along with me? Shiva, Monisha, Jitin?
Raghuveer, I have configured it. Let me log in from my personal system and we can share it.
Why personal system? You can use your corporate device also. Use Entra admin.
Okay, one moment.
Yeah, because from personal system, you don't have Microsoft Teams, then how will you present?
Raghuveer, I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So you have said like if any of the agent get down, then it will pick up the second one, right?
It will pick up the second one. Absolutely. It will pick up the second one. But here, understand the configuration, what is happening. In my case, this is not the case. In my case, these two agents are not from the same domain. The domain is different.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's I mean.
So it will not. It will. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It will only go to another agent from the same domain, which is contoso.com. It will not go to another domain. That's what I'm trying to say. These are two different domains. Understand? It will start from here, from this domain, and it will look for any other agent from the same domain for authentication. Since I don't have any other agent, it will just give an error that the authentication server is not available. If I had multiple agents from the same domain, contoso.com, then it would have gone to the other agent. That's the logic. So unless, as long as I have this tail entry here, my configuration will not work.
Can you please show this as the agent name in the domain that in the virtual?
Yeah, it's the same. You can see here. So this is my domain controller.
So you says like we can add one more extra agent, authentication
Magic.
agent in that
Right.
same domain.
See, match the name. Windows 2K22-ADDSVM. This is the one. And if you want to match the domain name also, contoso.com, you can find it here. See the domain name, contoso.com with 2S.
Yeah.
So that's
in the
exactly
same
what
VM.
I have here.
In the same VM use.
Yeah, that's the reason it says green. And it says exclamation sign. It is inactive. This one is green, but this sits on the top. So unless this entry goes, this entry will not come into the picture. Well,
okay.
Right? So you should have agent from the same domain. That's what I'm trying to say. Since I did this exercise last night and I deleted all the configuration so that I can start from scratch this morning and exactly show you so that you can see it from your own eyes that yes, it does work. You don't believe me for what I was saying. You saw it for what I showed you. That's the reason this entry still remains. And what I'm trying to say that I cannot remove this entry. It will automatically go within 24 hours. And once this entry goes, then this will be the entry which is left. And this is the right domain to which I'm trying to authenticate this user. This user sync admin is from that domain only, contoso.com, double S, not single S. That's the reason I said if I have any other participant who can show, then you will be able to see this capability. Because in your case, you will not have this tail entry. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So do I have any participant
one
who
more
can share the
question?
screen?
Maybe it's stupid. Like see, I
There
was
is
somewhat bit
no question is
confused.
stupid. Ask your question.
I was somewhat bit confused. Like, see, you have mentioned 3 agents. Agents is nothing but
The server.
I mean, server, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Then
Agent
you are
means domain
maintaining 2
controller
VMs.
servers. Yeah.
Domain
Agent
controller
means
servers.
domain
So
controller servers.
servers. So we will have only one VM in the production, right?
Right now, I have only one VM, which is joined to this domain.
No. See,
Yeah.
In real time scenario, I'm speaking about real time scenario.
Uh-huh.
Client will provide only one VM, right, for this type of things.
No. In real time scenario, you will have multiple domain controllers. You will not have one domain controller. Each domain controller is an agent.
Okay.
Then you understand the domain controller concept?
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay. So domain controllers are used for authentication. When users authenticate to an application, they provide credentials. Credentials are authenticated at domain controller. Any domain controller can do the authentication, whether it's a primary domain controller, whether it's a secondary domain controller, whether it's a read-only domain controller. Any Active Directory server in your environment can do the authentication. And that's exactly what it is asking for, this authentication agent. Authenticate. So they use the word agent. Don't get confused with the word agent. Agent here means authentication server.
Okay.
So don't get confused with this word agent. That's exactly what is shown here in the image also. If you look at the image, see, this is a server. Look at the icon. This is a server icon. It says pass-through authentication agent.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So is anyone sharing the screen or should we close and move on to the new topic? Because that was the last topic. I showed you the configuration. The only thing which is pending is the validation of that configuration, which I cannot show you in my environment.
Raghuveer, one more question, like as we are as we have created a sync admin user, right, from our end, so as to log in into this AD and use this as a, sync with the Microsoft Entra. So the same admin will be, shall we ask from the client or we need to create from our end this sync admins like this, the users?
See, this is a prerequisite that the user that will be involved into the configuration of Entra Connect Sync must have enterprise admin role. So obviously enterprise admin is a privileged role in an operations environment. No customer would give vendor enterprise admin role. So what customers do in this case, they will ask you to do a screen share, open that specific box, and they will type the credentials by themselves instead of sharing it with you. And those credentials are not needed all the time. You only need those credentials when you're doing a configuration change. And obviously, for each configuration change, there will be a change request that will be approved by the customer, and customer will have one representative in during that change window who will support you with any credentials that you need. That's how it happens in production.
Okay, and so they are providing, the AD team will provide this, right?
Absolutely.
Who is on-premises team will provide us this user details. So with this user details, we can able to sync with the cloud.
Absolutely, you will be able to sync with the cloud. Yes, Shiva.
Thank you.
Raghu, one question about this writeback feature which you explained earlier. So I understood about the that's pass-through authentication. I understood about that authentication will be depending on the domain controller for authentication. But what about the policies? When you say the password policies, it should rely or it should depend on whatever policy set up at the on-prem ID, right? So I'm not sure if this comes up in our real-time scenarios or not. Let's say you had two users, Contoso user 1 and 2, before we enabled this pass-through authentication. If the passwords of those which were created earlier did not match the password policies of on-prem, will it be flagged to the users like that needs to be changed or something, or how that scenario will be handled?
Okay. So first of all, you will not have both pass-through authentication and write-back enabled at the same time. The moment you enable pass-through, write-back will be disabled. Because you are absolutely right. If write-back remains enabled, then there will be a flag because on-premises policy is different. Entra policy is different. By virtue of write-back, Contoso user 1 password was changed in Entra, keeping in compliance with Entra policy. And there is a high probability that Entra and on-premises policy is different. So when this user tries to sign in, after pass-through authentication is enabled, user will supply the current password that was changed in Entra, and that password will not match with on-premises password policy. So user will be able to sign in. However, user will get a prompt to change the password, and user will need to change the password as per the on-premises password policy. That's how it will happen. So this used to happen in the previous days when these services were not mature. But now this service is mature. Automatically, when you enable pass-through, password write-back will get disabled.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Raghu. And the second question about these domain controllers, let's say in our environment, we have 4 domain controllers, okay? And we will install the Entra Sync in all the 4 agents. So if our domain controllers, the replication is enabled, then whatever we changes in any one of the Entra Sync, I know this will not be done frequently, but if there are any changes in any Entra Sync connectors, will that be taken care as our domain controller replication settings?
Absolutely. At any point in time, all the domain controllers are expected to have the same sysvol folder. So if you just go into the depth of it, it is sysvol folder that gets replicated. Sysvol contains the attributes, the security identifier, which is nothing but the credentials of each user. So as soon as sysvol folder is updated, any Entra Sync agent which is running on that domain controller will do the synchronization.
Yeah, okay, Raghuveer.
So in the production environment, it will be a seamless functionality. There will be no changes. And as you rightly said, you don't make configuration changes on this service so frequently. They are done once in 6 months. I've seen customers who have not done any changes in the last 2 years because it's a complicated service, and any impact of configuration change may have a greater impact on your business. Imagine you're changing some configuration because of which synchronization stops. And it is pass-through authentication. Now, no user will be able to sign into any cloud application because cloud applications will require authentication from Entra. Entra has a dependency on on-premises, and there is a configuration, there is a synchronization issue. Nothing will work. You have no option but to quickly approach Microsoft because only Microsoft has this capability to disable this configuration from backend. You will not be able to disable it. Now the question is why you will not be able to disable it. The answer is because when you change any configuration, if you remember these steps, the first thing that you type is your global admin credential. And since there is a connectivity issue, since there is a synchronization issue, when you type global admin credentials, the server will try to go to Entra to authenticate it. And since there are issues, it will not be able to reach to Entra and nothing will work. So you will not be able to make any configuration changes also. This is one loophole of this design, which I shared with Microsoft long time back. And I said that you should have a break glass account configured at the configuration. Break glass account basically means that instead of a global admin user, you should also, I'm saying, you should have reverse synchronization enabled. For example, my Entra admin is global admin user, right? So what you should do in this case, I should be allowed to either configure two users, one global admin, which is cloud only user, and one global admin, which is on-premise user. So when synchronization stops, my global admin, cloud global admin user will not work here, but my on-premise global admin user will work. So this is pending with Microsoft. They are currently working on it. But this is one scenario wherein you will need to approach Microsoft without wasting any time if this synchronization fails in pass-through. So pass-through has its own benefits and drawbacks also. And if you ask me what organizations uses, most of the organizations, they just go with pass-through, password and hash synchronization. They don't go with pass-through because when they are in cloud with the objective that soon they will deprecate everything on premises and they will have Entra as their centralized identity solution. So with that objective in mind, they try and reduce dependency on on-premises directory as much as possible. But I also know a couple of customers who use pass-through and they have heavy dependence on on-premises. In fact, their admins are more Active Directory friendly rather Entra friendly, and it's a decision, or I would say we call it it's a cultural decision that they have taken that they want to continue with on-premises for most of their policies because that's where they feel themselves more strong, more committed, and more in control. See, in Entra, you lose control because it's a SaaS application. In on-premises, you have full control because it's under your control. So it's a cultural decision that they have taken that they want to go with on-premises only, and they have pass-through authentication enabled. I know a couple of customers who have pass-through authentication enabled, but they had not this cultural thing in mind. They just did it because they found it better to manage password policies at one place rather managing at two places, or rather ensuring that the policies remains the same at both places. So it's a decision that we take. It's more of a design and architecture decision that you need to be aware of. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, Raghuveer. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we are losing time. If there is any person who wants to share the screen, who has done the synchronization, it will hardly take 5 minutes to show you the validation of pass-through authentication. Otherwise, I will move on to the next topic because I can't show it to you today, at least as long as that entry reflects in my system and I don't have an option to remove that entry. That is where Microsoft has dependency, and I can't go to Microsoft because I don't have a paid support here. So who was trying to show? I'm saying this feels really bad that none of you have done the configuration. None of you have followed me in the morning and at least done the configuration. Not pass through, but the synchronization part. Pass through we can configure in 1 minute and we can validate it. All right. So since none of you volunteering for it, I confirm that pass-through part is also completed. I've explained it theoretically, and I've shown you the configuration also. The validation part is pending, that you can do it yourself by doing the configuration. And if you're stuck, just share the screen with me or take a screenshot and I will help you with that. So we are done with all the hybrid part. I'm saying anything and everything related to hybrid synchronization that you need to be aware of. That's all about hybrid identity synchronization part that you need to be aware of. The couple of things that you need to aware of is on the agent part, which is this agent, though it is running on your system, but it's a SaaS service. Microsoft has the capability to do the configuration changes or to update this agent from the backend, which is the default configuration that you can't change. If you ever feel anything, I'm saying if you ever, the most of the changes that you will do either in customized synchronization options. If you want to export the current configuration, you can do it from here. Privacy setting is nothing that provides you privacy information. And then the troubleshoot. If at any point in time things do not work as expected, you can launch the troubleshooting tools. It's a CMD tool, which is based on PowerShell. If you don't have PowerShell, then it will automatically open in CMD. This is the tool. You just need to, type these numbers. It's a simulated tool. For example, if I want to troubleshoot object synchronization, I will just type enter 1, hit enter, and it will ask me, okay, what do you want to troubleshoot? Do you want to diagnose synchronization issues? I will say 1, it will diagnose. It will quickly diagnose and check whether there is any issue or not. But before it does that, it will ask me enter 80 object distinguish name. So it will ask me the name of that user wherein I'm getting the synchronization issues. So I can type the distinguished name of that object like Contoso dot, I'm sorry, what was the name? Contoso dot user one at contoso.com. So that's how you type the agent, the name. It will search for that object and it will tell you whether there are any issues with that user or not. Okay, I believe the username has one S, not two S. Let me just double check. No, Contoso or user one. Contoso.user. Contoso.user one. Okay. So it says could not find an object with on-premise AD with this distinguished name. Contoso.user1 at contoso.com using connector credentials. Confirm object existence. So I will say, yes, this object exists. It will ask me for credentials, admin credentials here. I will say Contoso sync admin, provide the credentials to authenticate. And it will, okay, this is wrong. I need to type backslash instead of forward slash. So it will authenticate and check whether that user is there. So it could not find the user. I'm saying you just need to type the distinguished name of this user. So that's how you do the troubleshooting. I just need to find that information from here. That is my Contoso user one. Okay, you can see, you can troubleshoot other things also. Actually, I needed to type the a username like that. I need to type the contoso.user1 and contoso.com. So somehow this part is not working, but that's how you type the distinguished name. So this is just a troubleshooter that you need to understand. Probably probably this is coming here because this is a lab environment, and in Entra ID you have a separate solution. I'm saying Entra you have on Microsoft.com. Here it is contoso.com. That's the reason it is happening. Because in a production environment, you will have the same domain, so it will be able to find the username. So that's the troubleshooting tool that you want to understand. As I said, I've explained this tool in detail, all the options and all the configurations in detail in the other video on Microsoft Defender XDR training. You can go through that video of 4+ hours. Then you will have everything configured here. So that's what you do when it comes to troubleshooting. It has some options. If you want to quit, you can type quit and you can come out of it and close it then directly. So these are some of the options that you see here. That's all. Nothing. This is related to federation. We don't configure federation from here. We typically configure federation from the traditional view of configuring the federation. So these are all the options that you see. When this service matures more, you will see additional options. For example, you can refresh the Active Directory schema also. So for each configuration, you need this Azure AD account. And if pass-through authentication is enabled, and if there is a connectivity issue with Entra, then you will not be able to perform any activity here, because each time you will type this information, the system will try to connect with Entra to authenticate this credential. And since there is a connectivity issue, you will not be able to authenticate from here. Then you can probably try and doing it from other domain controllers where you have this agent installed. So that's what you can do. Is everyone with me on this? Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's done. That's all about hybrid identity related work. Wherein we do synchronization, we configure single sign-on with the help of pass-through authentication. We configure password write-back. I did not configure password write-back. If you want to see password write-back, it hardly takes a minute to configure. So here you see configure synchronization options. Now, when you configure password write-back, pass-through authentication will automatically get disabled. So here I can configure password write-back. I can also configure group write-back if I want. And see, it gives me an error. It says group write-back forest. So it says, yes, write back the forest, because I have single forest, single domain here. So this is giving me the option that I can select here for this group write-back. I can provide the username and password. So I would rather not configure group write-back for a moment. I'll just show you password write-back because this requires some additional configuration. Done. So password write-back is getting configured. It's enabling password write-back. All right, the configuration complete. Exit. I'll just need to wait for a minute. When you configure some settings, you need to give it some time. In a production environment, you configure it, then you wait, and then you test, then you validate the service. So I'll wait at least for a minute. While I'm waiting, I will just add the password writeback. Password has synchronization. Okay, so I'm yet to put the documentation for password writeback. You will sign in. Pass-through is okay. Federation is okay. This is the capability. Pass-through authentication I've already added. Troubleshooting, this is another URL that you need to be aware of. Troubleshooting Entra Connect Sync issue. This is the another documentation that you need to be aware of. This documentation comes handy when you are using proxy server in your environment and all traffic to internet goes through proxy. So you can configure the proxy configuration, on the server. So this is basically for proxy configuration that typically it's taken care by the IT team. Entra Connect Sync issues. Yeah, object synchronization. This is the URL that I was talking about, which is updated on 11/15. This you need to have access to. All right, it's been a minute, more than a minute. Let's just go back to our system. I'm sure by now writeback is configured. Okay, so all of you, if you remember, when last time I tried to change the password of Contoso user 1, Contoso user 2, I was not able to do. But when I was trying to change the password of Farhan, I was able to do. So Farhan is not an identity which is synchronized from on-premises, and hence I can change the password for Farhan. It will not stop you. It will allow me to reset the password. However, for Contoso user 1 and user 2, it was not allowing me to change the password. But now that password writeback is enabled, I will be able to change the password. So if I click on reset password, it will allow me to change the password. You can see it is giving me an option to change the password. It says this user will be assigned a temporary password that must be changed on the next sign-in. So now I can change the password for a Contoso user 1. I can provide him a temporary password. With that temporary password, Contoso user will log in and the same password will be written back to on-premises. And Contoso user then can log into any on-premises application with the same password because writeback functionality is enabled here. Now, when password writeback functionality is enabled, it will automatically disable the on-premises domain controller password policy, because on-premises domain controller password policy could be different. So to avoid any confusion or conflict, when you enable password writeback, the on-premises domain controller password policy is disabled. How it is disabled? Who disables it? The the same sync admin user who has enterprise admin rights, because it is the highest level of configuration. So sync admin user is actually disabling that policy so that there is no conflict. And the moment you enable pass-through authentication, password write-back will be disabled, because both services are conflicting in nature, or they may create further conflict. So that's about password write-back functionality. And I've shown you the validation of it also. Any question on this, guys? Is everyone with me on this? Great. All right, we'll take a break now. It's 12:15. We'll take a break for 10 minutes. At 12:55, we will resume the session, and I will share the next topic. And I will also give you some labs to do as home assignment, because they were due to complete today. Since this topic got extended, you had a lot of questions, and I'm somebody who always makes sure to not answer the question, but to show the evidence. That's the reason it got extended. So I'll give you some labs for home assignment, and I will just explain the theoretical aspects, share the lab that you need to do, and show it to me tomorrow. All right, the last topic is the difference. So there are two sync agents now, Entra Connect Sync versus Cloud Sync. There are two synchronization agents which are available. Until last year you only had one, but now you have two. So let's understand the difference between them also. I'll put that into the chat window. Please open it on your respective system. I have it presented here. So what is Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync and Connect Sync? Connect Sync, you've already seen how it works. Understand the Cloud Sync and how they are different. It says with Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync, provisioning from AD to Microsoft Entra ID is orchestrated in Microsoft Online Service, which basically means you don't need to deploy an agent. Connect Sync is an agent that has additional configurations that gives you more control to configure what you want to synchronize, what you don't want to, what capabilities you want to enable or disable. However, with Cloud Sync, it's a Microsoft Online Service. So an organization only needs to deploy in their on-premises or I-hosted environment a lightweight agent that acts as a bridge between Microsoft Entra ID and ID. The provisioning configuration is stored in Microsoft Entra ID and managed as part of the service, right? So you can see, I'm saying if you want to decide whether I need Connect Sync or Cloud Sync, this table will basically help you to decide. If you ask me what should I be using, I would say if you are a medium to enterprise organization, if you have 100 to 10,000, 100,000 employees, go with Connect Sync, because Connect Sync will provide you that capability. Connect Sync will allow you to synchronize multiple forests, multiple domains. It will give you more administrative control. Cloud Sync is more of a SaaS service that is managed by Microsoft Entra, where you will not have much control. So Cloud Sync is primarily meant for small organizations with very minimal or no use cases. And here you can see the difference. So you will see that Connect Sync doesn't have this because Entra is providing it. For example, connect to single on-premise AD forest, yes. Connect to multiple, both supports. Connect to multiple disconnected, it doesn't support disconnected. Lightweight agent installation, it has lightweight. This is a heavy agent, but at the same time, it provides you more configuration. Multiple active agents for high availability. Over here, you will need to deploy multiple agents yourself. But since this is an online service, I'm saying this is a Microsoft service, it is always in high availability mode. However, this is the difference. Over here, the Cloud Sync doesn't support for devices. Connect Sync support devices, which basically means if I navigate to Entra, here, and if I go to devices, I will also have my devices synchronized here. So if I click on manage all devices, I will see my devices also synchronized here. right? But any device that is added to your directory will get synchronized with Entra Connect Sync. However, with Cloud Sync, it doesn't support device synchronization. So what if you want to configure device-based policies? What if you want to group devices and grant them, a certain level of access? That capability will be missing. Similarly, support for pass-through authentication. Cloud Sync doesn't support pass-through authentication, which could be a requirement for an organization. Filter on objects attributes value. You will not be able to do filtering here. Then you will see additional capabilities which are missing. Advanced customization. Connect Sync provides you additional customization and configuration options which are not available here. You will not be able to add multiple domains. That's another capability. Then comes writeback, unlimited number of objects per AD domain. You will have a limit here. Connect Sync supports unlimited number of AD objects. And that is where I said this is for medium to large enterprises where there are multiple objects, hundreds of thousands of objects. For example, your corporate. You have 500,000 employees across the globe, which means 500,000 identities plus 500,000 device identities, 10,000 plus at least couple of thousand servers. So Cloud Sync is not for you. It's for small organizations. Similarly, large groups up to 250,000 members, it doesn't support. Another thing, on-demand provisioning. On-demand provisioning is here. Why? Because it's an online service. So you just enable the service and it does the provisioning itself. You don't need to provide the configuration. So these are the difference. So you can compare and correlate. I have always gone with Connect Sync for most of my customers because I know probably tomorrow they don't need these capabilities, but in future they will need these capabilities. And the most important capability, which is migration from ADFS to PTA, is not available in Cloud Sync. So you can use, I'm saying you can go for Cloud Sync when the customer is of small scale and size. When there is a mid enterprise or enterprise customer, go with Connect Sync always. Is everyone with me on this differentiation? Great. So that's what you need to know. One last thing is Connect Sync Health and some basic troubleshooting that you can do. Now, if I go back to Entra ID, as I said that I don't have control here. When I go to Entra Connect Sync, and when I click on pass-through authentication, I see this entry, I can't remove it. Even if I go to troubleshoot, it is nothing but giving me some documentation. It basically shows me that how do we configure it. It shows me the configuration options. No troubleshooting is available. And on the portal, there is nothing that I cannot select this entry and I can remove it. So it will automatically disappear and the time frame is 24 hours. However, you will still have some basic troubleshooting or health options, which is health and analytics. So you can click on health and analytics and you will see the health of your synchronization service. You will see the health of Connect Sync agents or the synchronization objects which are in picture. So here you can see sync errors. This shows you all the sync errors if you have. So right now we don't have any synchronization errors. Things are absolutely running fine. You can also see sync servers, sync services which are currently synced. So you can see there is an error. If you click on that error, it will tell you why there is an error. There is an error because of this. Because right now the Connect Sync agent is installed on 3 set of servers. Windows 22K ADDS. Now this server is not present. It says unhealthy. Why? Because the service is not able to communicate because I deleted that server last night after doing my testing. Then there is another server which is currently up and running, and that's the reason it says healthy. And then there is another VM, which is 2016 VM where I did the testing. This is also unhealthy. Why? Because the VM is shut down. So it shows you some monitoring data. And you can see any sync error. If there was any sync error, you can export the data also from the sync perspective. So that's what you basically get to see here. You can also enable this service, which is allow Microsoft Entra Connect Health Agent to upload all error logs. So if there is any error that comes, you can enable this service, and what it will do, it will upload all the error logs and just sync error logs to Microsoft, so that if you approach Microsoft asking for support, Microsoft will not ask you for logs. They can directly look into the backend, the logs. By default, we don't enable logging. So we don't want to send logs to Microsoft because sometimes log contain some crucial information that you don't want to share unless explicitly needed. So we always keep it disabled, but you can configure it also. In the settings, you will find the same option of logging only. So that's about Microsoft Entra Connect Health or analytics service, which is available. Health and analytics. That's all. Rest, the more you work with this service, the more you understand the features. That is all for now, as far as this service is concerned. That's it. It helps to look for and troubleshoot up to a certain extent errors related to sync service. So that is all for today from this service perspective. Let's talk about some labs that you need to do. So yesterday I was able to complete this exercise along with some official labs in the other batch, in the afternoon batch. So we will need to do some official labs of SC300. I will share the labs and I will quickly explain what is there in the lab. You will need to do those labs because this information will be shared with your management at the end of the training, that which participant did how many labs. And it will be shared for official labs. Any lab which is outside of SC300 official labs is an extra labs. For example, these labs which we did today, since yesterday, whatever we are doing, this is an additional ask from your management, not related to SC300. So I completed it and I could see that most of you did not do it, which is okay. But these labs you all need to do because this information I need to share. So I'll share these labs with you. The first lab that you all need to do is this. I'll put the lab information in the chat window. You all need to make sure to complete this lab. Let's see what this lab is. I'll quickly explain. These are official labs. There are a total of 28 labs that we all need to do. Total of 28 labs, which means a minimum of 2 labs we will do in training session, and 1 lab I will share with you as a home assignment. So this is my first lab that you all need to do. Now, this is the simulated lab. So this is the lab instructions. I'm saying this is an SOP that contains step-by-step process that needs to be done. And for doing this lab, Microsoft provides you a simulated environment wherein your hands are tied and you just need to follow what they are asking you to do. In your Azure account, you have full control, which means you can also explore other capabilities. And that's exactly what is needed to have equivalent knowledge of SC300, not for certification. For certification, you can work with simulated environment also. Because in certification, if there is any question that comes on the lab, then it will come from these 28 labs only. But if there is any conceptual or theoretical question comes, that will always be from theoretical or conceptual knowledge. So in this lab, they basically show you that how do we assign, and so you've done that a number of times so far. Even today, you've seen that how do I assign role at Entra level? How do I assign role at subscription level? That's exactly what you need to do in this lab. In this lab, you will first create a user and then test whether that user has access to a specific application without providing that user access to that application. For example, they are creating a user with the name Chris Green. You can create a user with whatever comes to your mind and then try and see whether user can create an app registration. And you will notice that user will not be able to because user doesn't have access to. So till this point, user is trying to create and user is not able to. Then as an exercise 2, you will assign application admin role, Entra role to the user, Chris Green, and then you will see whether user is able to create an app. So this is where you will assign that role from here, and then the user will be able to create create the app till this point. Then exercise 3 says remove a role assignment. So in exercise 3, you will need to remove a role assignment, which means the role that you have granted to Chris Green, application admin, you will need to remove that role. In exercise 4, you will need to create multiple users. So if you want to create one user, you can create it from Entra and say you can just click on users and you can click on new user and create new user. It's easy. You can create a user like this. But what if I ask you to create 100 users? How will you create those 100 users in one go? For that, you will need to use these bulk operations. You can create multiple users, you can delete multiple users, and you can invite multiple users. This is bulk user create, bulk user delete, and bulk user invite option. This is exactly what you need to do as part of this lab number 1. This is the first lab. Here you will create bulk users. So it basically gives you the step-by-step process. How do you create bulk users, which basically involves downloading a CSV, then putting the user information, and after that uploading the same CSV in the same UI, and then the users will get created and you will verify them. Then how do you create bulk users using PowerShell? This part you can skip. Our focus is working on portal, doing the configuration from portal, not from CLI and PowerShell. You can skip this part. Then comes how do you remove a user? So how do you delete a user? So you just select the user and hit delete. But what if you need to delete multiple users? How will you delete them? Now, there are 2 ways to delete multiple users. I can check the box against each username like this, and I can hit delete. But what if I have 10,000 entries here? On one page, I will only see not more than 50 entries. So I cannot keep scrolling it down and looking for username. That is where we have the same option, which is bulk delete. So that's where it shows you how to delete multiple users using the same bulk delete option, wherein you will download the CSV, and in that CSV, you just need to provide the user principal name. Just type the user principal name in a separate row, upload it back and submit. It will automatically delete those users. And in the end, if a user is deleted, and if that was done accidentally, or if that user comes back and say that I want to work with you once again, and you want to restore the capabilities, then how do you do that? So for that, you basically go to deleted users. Here you see all the deleted users. You can select any of the user and hit restore user. The user will be restored back and will become an active user. So that's what this lab talks about. And then in the end, how do you assign a license to a user? In this lab, they are assigning Windows 10 license. You don't have a Windows 10 license. You have Entra P2 license. So instead of assigning Windows 10, you will assign Entra P2 license. That's exactly what you will do this lab. That's it. So this is your official SC300 lab that you all need to do, which is the first lab that is related to manage user roles, which involves creation, deletion, restoration, and restoration of users, and also involves assigning roles to users and assigning licenses to users. So these are the 5 activities that you will do in this lab, which is written here. Provisioning of users one at a time as well as bulk, removing users one at a time as well as bulk, restoring a user only possible within 30 days, assigning users roles, and assigning license to user. This is what you will do in lab number 1. Lab number 0 is more of a preparatory lab wherein you basically sign up to a Microsoft Azure trial using Azure sponsorship pass, and then you subscribe to Entra ID P2 trial, something that you have already done. So we are skipping lab number 0. Lab number 1 I've explained. Then you also need to do lab number 2 as a home assignment today. I'll share that information in the chat. So in lab number 3, you are working with groups now. You have seen how to work with users. Now you'll be working with groups, which is you will create a security group. There are 2 types of group, Microsoft 365 group and security group. So you will create a security group and add a user to it. Very simple. You already know how to do it, but as part of the process, you all need to do this lab. So you will create a security group and you will add a user, and then you will check whether that user has access to a specific service. Like in this case, they are creating a user. So they already have a user with the name Delia Dennis, and they're checking whether Delia has access to M365. In your case, you will check whether that user has access to P2 license or not. And you will find that the user doesn't have access to P2, then you will grant user access to P2 license. And after you grant user access to P2 license, you can perform any activity that is related to P2, right? That's what you will do in this lab. So in this lab, you are creating a group, you are assigning a user to that group, and then you are assigning license at the group level. In the previous lab, you have assigned license at a user level. So here you are assigning at a group level. Then comes exercise 3 in this lab, which is creating a dynamic group with all users as member. This is something that I will do tomorrow. I will give you a demo of how do we create a dynamic group that will automatically have users ingested into it as and when users are created based on certain logic. So exercise 3 is something that I will be explaining tomorrow, but till exercise 1 and 2 in lab number 3 you need to do, and lab number 2 you need to do. That's what you need to do here. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Great. So that's what you need to do. Tomorrow we will do lab number 4, lab number 5, and lab number 6 because they are small labs and that doesn't take much time. So we will complete 4, 5, and 6 tomorrow in the session along with theoretical explanation that I will do. I am trying to complete all the topics of SC300 by the end of next week, so that the remaining days, 2 days that we get, in those 2 days, I will be covering the custom topics and say some additional request that has come from your management with respect to some additional topics outside of this SC300. So I will be focusing on last 2 days on completing those exercises. So the target is to complete all the labs of SC300 within this week, which is we will have 5 days in this week, 5 days in next week. We will do 3 labs each day. So that way we will be able to complete. 2 labs we will do in the session. 1 lab I will share as a home assignment to you that you will need to do yourself and come back with questions if you have any. So we will need to expedite, we will need to increase the pace, and we will need to do more hands-on because we have almost done enough of theory so far. Wherever theory is needed, I will be doing it. I will be sharing the documentation. I have got a couple of presentations, official presentations with me that directly are from Microsoft. I will be sharing those presentations as a deliverables along with this session transcript that I'm creating on each day as a high level information or input in terms of what all topics were covered on each day, just for a record purpose, so that when you refer to the session recording will not tell you that what do I contain in the 4 hours, but this will tell you that, okay, if the session recording is for a specific day, this is what I expect to see in the session recording. So that will help you to revise and prepare accordingly. That's the only purpose of putting together this session transcript. So with that said, I will not proceed further with any new topic. We will close the session here, do the synchronization side by side, keep doing your official work. And then once that synchronization complete starts validating, look for writeback policy, look for pass-through authentication, look for password hash synchronization, create an OU, add some users to that OU, and then change the synchronization option by removing user OU, unchecking user OU, and selecting that custom OU. And then you will realize that automatically all the users that got synchronized in Microsoft Entra, they will disappear and new users from that specific OU will start to synchronize. So do as much hands-on as you can do, because this is an opportunity for you to practice in a production environment. Your hands are tied. You have a production environment. You can't even do a minor configuration change. So you want to do that because you know that it will fix the issue, but you can't do it unless it is approved by your customer and management. So this is your opportunity to learn to break things, fix it, This is your playground. Make optimal use of it.